I would next like to examine another symbol of this worldwide worship of the sun god, and that symbol is the obelisk, a tall four-sided pillar tapering towards its pyramidal top. This is the opening of the Wednesday morning news program at NBC News. Since this is a morning news show, it is presumed that this is a picture of a sunrise rather than of a sunset, but notice that the picture of the sunrise was specifically taken with the obelisk in the front. It appears that someone at NBC knows about the connection between the rising sun and the obelisk. Albert Pike, the famous mason, told us what the purpose of the obelisk was. He said the obelisk was consecrated to the sun, so the obelisk is a symbol of sun worship. But Carl Claudy, another 33rd degree Mason, told us that the obelisk had an esoteric or concealed meaning. He wrote this: "The initiate of old saw in the obelisk the very spirit of the god he worshipped. In Egypt, the obelisk stood for the very presence of the sun god himself." Please repeat that. Please remember that. In Egypt, the obelisk stood for the very presence of the sun god himself. So the obelisk stands for the very presence of the sun god wherever it's located. Now I'd like to explain that the sun god is Lucifer. We'll be covering that for the next several sections about this to show you that the sun god is and always has been Lucifer, Satan the devil. Now here's an obelisk with a specific connection with sun god worship. This obelisk was erected in 1596 by King Henry IV after a victory in a war. Note that there are 12 blocks in the obelisk, with the pyramid on top being the 13th. So here we see the Masonic number 13 hidden in the number of blocks in the obelisk. We'll see that concealed number 13 again in another obelisk of great importance a little later. And this is a close-up of the top, and it shows a sun and a crown on top. That appears to mean that the sun is a god or a king. If this is a concealed message that King Henry IV was claiming that his victory in the war was due to the Lord of the world, the sun god, it might very well be. This is a page from a catalog produced by Barnes & Noble booksellers. They sell various art objects, one of which is this miniature obelisk. And if you could read the caption to the side, it would say that the obelisk is 13 inches high. I do not believe that this is a coincidence. Those who produced this miniature obelisk knew the symbology of the number 13, and they made their obelisk precisely that high. Before I continue my discussion of the obelisk as a symbol to the Masons, I'd like to explain why the number 33 is so important to the Masons. It is a symbolic number, as we shall see. This is a drawing of the human backbone. If you count the number of vertebrae, you will find that they number 32. There are 32 vertebrae in the human backbone. That would make the skull the 33rd vertebrae because it is connected to the backbone at the top. The skull is the location of the brain, therefore it is the seat of the human ability to reason. And as we have seen, the Masons worship the mind, the seat of the human reason. And to prove that, I'd like to refer to this book entitled Deadly Deception by a 33rd degree Mason named Jim Shaw. Mr. Shaw became a Christian during the interval between his 32nd and 33rd degrees of the Masonic order. So he was not a Christian when he was invited to become a 33rd degree Mason. But before he went, he made a decision about Christ. He wrote this about his 33rd degree Masonic initiation ceremony. One of the conductors then handed the candidate a human skull upside down with wine in it. And then Mr. Shaw states that the initiate was asked to drink from it. A few years ago, while I was touring a museum in Florida, the guide who was taking a group of us through the exhibits told us that headhunters from the jungles of South America sever the head from their victim, remove the skull, and then drink blood from it. This is supposed to impart the wisdom of the vanquished to the victor. And here we see the Masons duplicating the ceremony for apparently the same reason. It is presumed that the Masons drink wine, a colored substitute for the real thing, meaning blood, from the skull so that they can symbolically obtain the wisdom of the person whose head they are drinking from. And some of the world's leading politicians and leaders have drunk wine from a skull as a 33rd degree Mason. I mentioned at the beginning of the lecture that I was going to offend some of you. I am now going to show you a series of slides, some of which will be offensive to the Catholics in the viewing audience. I want you to know that I am sorry for that, but I must tell the truth whenever I find it, because what I have found is that this conspiracy has become involved in concealing the symbols of this sun worship inside the Catholic Church. But please let me add this comment for the Catholic. Catholics do not become conspirators. Conspirators become Catholics. But I must hasten to add, if these slides offend you, do not take it up with me, but ask your church why they are utilizing these Masonic or Luciferic symbols in their religion. As I said once before, I was a Catholic for 39 years of my life, and I only wish that someone had shown me these slides years before, because I would have been offended and then asked the church for some answers. And if I couldn't have found any, I would have come out a lot sooner than I did. So Catholic, if you are offended at these slides, do not be offended at me. I am only the messenger. You should be offended by the message. This conspiracy has infiltrated your church, and I'm only trying to point out how that has happened and what these symbols mean. Let me start by showing you some slides of the magnificent Gothic cathedrals constructed by the Catholic Church. Then I'd like to explain that they contain some Masonic symbols in their building walls. Let me first show you a picture of the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, France. This is just one of the many beautiful Gothic structures that were designed and constructed by members of the Masonic Lodge. The Masons admit that they have hidden, concealed symbols in the construction of these cathedrals. This is a close-up of the rose window on the front side of the church. The circle next to the outer ring has 32 sections in it, and the circle in the middle would become the 33rd. As I have explained, the number 33 is a concealed number of great importance to the Masons and their worship of Lucifer, the sun god. This is a slide of Salisbury Cathedral in England. Here we see two outside obelisks and one in the center. This is the beautiful Gothic Cathedral at Ulm, Germany. Once again, here we see the huge obelisk in the front of the cathedral and two to the rear. Also notice that there are 12 smaller obelisks on the side, so that the huge obelisk becomes the 13th. Once again, the Masons have concealed their symbols around the churches they built for the Catholic Church. Don't forget that the obelisk stands for the very presence of the sun god, Lucifer himself. Another obelisk of some importance is this one in the Vatican in Rome, Italy. This obelisk was moved here in 1586 by a Catholic pope named Pope Sixtus V. So it has been here for over 400 years. The next two slides are two pictures of the obelisk and two modern-day popes. And the first one shows Pope Paul VI addressing the crowd of people in St. Peter's Square right in front of the obelisk, the very presence of the sun god, Lucifer. And the second photo shows the current Pope, John Paul II, also addressing the crowd once again in St. Peter's Square. If I was Pope and heard one person comment about the obelisk being a symbol of the very presence of the sun god himself, I would first check it out, and if it were true, I would then have that obelisk immediately removed. But this obelisk has been there for over 400 years. There is another Masonic connection to the area near the obelisk. This is another shot of the same square looking from the other end. The Vatican, the building in which the Pope resides, is at the other end of the picture. Those columns around the obelisk are called the Bernini Colonnade. As best I can count, there are 32 columns on each side. The 33rd would be the circle around the obelisk. Remember that the circle is a symbol of the sun god, and that the number 33 is a Masonic symbol concealing a worship of the sun god Lucifer. I will show you other connections between Masonry and the Catholic Church a little later in another context. Next, I'd like to return to my discussion of the Great Seal of the United States. This is called the front side of the Great Seal. Notice the eagle shown in the center. Many historians have commented on the debate in early America on whether the founding fathers should name the eagle or the wild turkey as this nation's national bird. Please forgive me for using the drawing of a turkey found in a liquor ad, because it was the only, the only wild turkey I could find. The debate was not a debate at all. It was only a cover because it is now known that the eagle was always going to be the national bird of America. The Masons have told us how important the eagle is as a symbol of something else. I'd like to quote 6 writers on the subject, 5 of whom are Masons. I will not identify these. These are just comments to show you how important the eagle is in mysticism. The first slide says, in mysticism, the eagle is a symbol of initiation. The eagle is of great antiquity, figuring in the symbolic inventory of the Egyptians as the sun. So please hold that thought. I'll discuss it a little later, a little further. As wisdom is attained through reason, the eagle is also symbolic of reason. Here's another quote. The eagle was sacred to the sun. And here are some Masonic thoughts on how the eagle was connected to the sun as a symbol. The eagle was a bird consecrated to the sun in Egypt. The eagle also represented the great Egyptian sun god Amun-Ra. The eagle is a symbol of the infinite supreme reason or intelligence. And the next quote will explain why the eagle is a symbol of the sun. The eagle is also supposed to be the only creature that can look directly into the sun. If we humans look directly at the sun, we will go blind. Apparently the eagle can look directly at the sun without going blind. So the eagle is a concealed symbol of sun worship because he can look directly at the sun without going blind. That means that he can look directly at the face of the sun god, and we humans cannot. So I believe that is the reason the eagle has become a universal symbol of the sun god. Let's continue with our thoughts about this sun god and the eagle. What if Kur-Om, the symbol of the light and representative of the sun, were also the symbol of the divine and perfect truth that dazzles the eyes of all except the eagles and the hawks, which in ancient Egypt were sacred to Atum, Amun-Ra, and Mendes, the great gods. So the eagle has 2 hidden symbolism. One is that the eagle can go directly to the sun god, and the second is that the eagle is a symbol of reason. And to show you that the eagle on the Great Seal of the United States and on the American dollar bill is not a drawing of a real eagle, this eagle has 32 feathers on the right wing and 33 on the left wing. There are some who claim that this is an eagle from the Old Testament, but I want to state that the God of the Bible does not make any imperfect eagles. This eagle is imperfect. It has 32 feathers on one wing and 33 on the other. Once again, the numbers 32 and 33 are extremely important to the Masons and their concealed worship of the sun god Lucifer. This is what Egyptologists refer to as the winged symbol of perfection. Unfortunately, this slide's taken a little bit high, but you'll notice that there are 2 snakes, one on either side of the circle, the symbol of the sun, and then on the side are feathers. You will count 31 on the right and 32 on the left. So the circle, the symbol of the sun, would be the 32nd for the right side and the 33rd for the left. This shows you that this Egyptian symbol, this symbol of 32 and 33, is very, very old. And the snake on each side is a universal symbol of the sun god Lucifer. I'd like to show you some other fascinating 33s concealed in history. This is a symbol of the government of the old Soviet Union. Notice the partial circle on the bottom center of the symbol. If you count the rays sticking out from the semicircle, there are precisely 32 of them. And if the semicircle was completed, it would be a circle, and the circle is a symbol of the sun. And if you add the 32 and the circle as 33, then you now have a connection to the Masonic Lodge. One can only imagine what these Masonic symbols have to do with the Russian government. So as I say, you add 32 rays and one circle, you get 33, and it's a concealed number of the worship of Lucifer. This is the flag of Kazakhstan, one of the Russian republics. It also has 32 rays sticking out from the central circle, a symbol of the sun. This is the flag of, and help me with this, Kyrgyzstan. That's the best I can do with it. And it is similar to the flag of Kazakhstan with 32 rays and the circle being the 33rd. This is the symbol of the United Nations. First, notice that the number of leaves on each side is 13, another Masonic number. Don't count the one on the bottom, the 14th. That's separated from the others. So that doesn't count, but you count the leaves on the side, and there are precisely 13 of them. I'll discuss the significance of this number in a few more moments. Notice that the globe is divided into 32 divisions, and the circle at the top becomes the 33rd division. Once again, the Masonic number of 33 is concealed in a symbol, this time inside the symbol of the United Nations. But I've discovered another strange coincidence involving a concealed number 33. This is the drawing of Quetzalcoatl. We're going to have to go forward one more slide. This is the slide I wanted. We've got these two slides in reverse order. This is a drawing of Quetzalcoatl, the serpent god, descending from heaven to man on a ladder of 32 steps that I found in a book about Latin American culture. If heaven is the step on the ladder, it is the 33rd one in sequence. Before we leave that drawing, please pay attention to the god shown in the upper left-hand corner. This is a close-up of that drawing, and it appears that the god being worshipped is Ringo Starr, the drummer for the rock and roll group called the Beatles. Obviously, Ringo Starr was a god being worshipped by the sun worshippers centuries ago. Just kidding, just having a little fun with you. Now we're going to go forward to show you the slide we've already seen. The slide of Ringo Starr on the left and of Quetzalcoatl coming from heaven to the earth on a ladder of 32 rungs. Now this is really fascinating. This is a wall map with a piece of string over the 33rd degree northern latitude. If one looks for historical events that have occurred on or near this latitude, one finds something very interesting. Some of the most momentous events in the past have occurred under the 33rd degree latitude. This is once again Mackey's Encyclopedia, a rather dark slide, forgive me, perhaps the finest encyclopedia ever written about the Masons, written by Albert Mackey, a 33rd degree Mason who later became the head of the Masonic Order. This is a page from inside the encyclopedia, and it says that Charleston, South Carolina was selected as the first home of the Council of the 33rd degree Masonic Lodge. And Charleston, South Carolina is right underneath the 33rd degree latitude. That means that the Masons must have known the significance of the 33rd degree northern latitude. And that was why they selected Charleston, South Carolina for their home. It further states that the council was later moved to Washington, D.C. in 1870. We'll see the Masonic significance of the city of Washington, D.C. in a few more moments. Here are some other strange coincidences with events that have happened on the 33rd degree latitude. The line passes over the Trinity site in New Mexico where the first atomic bomb was dropped. This is a slide of the monument chosen to commemorate the site, and you'll notice that it is an obelisk. The obelisk is a 6,000-year-old symbol of the sun god, as we have already seen during this lecture. Remember that it is also a concealed Masonic symbol. The 33rd degree latitude passes over both Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. These two cities were the sites where the first and second atomic bombs were dropped at the end of World War II. Now, it is a known fact of history that America did not have to drop those bombs on Japan to end World War II because the nation was trying to surrender. But the bombs were dropped anyway. This is an article on the dropping of the bombs, and it reports that those two cities were cities with large populations of native Christians. So it appears that the two cities were selected for two reasons. They were both near the 33rd degree parallel, and because they were the home of Japanese Christians. It is another amazing coincidence that the man who decided to drop the bombs on these Christians when he knew that Japan was trying to surrender was President Harry Truman. Notice that in this picture our president is wearing his Masonic regalia. This portrait of him hangs in his library in Independence, Missouri. President Truman was a 33rd degree Mason when he dropped the bombs, and he became a 33rd degree Mason in October 1945 after he dropped the atomic bombs on innocent Christian civilians. As we've seen, some 33rd degree Masons take oaths to destroy Christianity. Harry Truman dropped 2 atomic bombs on Christians to end World War II. I presume that it is another interesting coincidence that Harry Truman was the 33rd president of the United States. And there is one more unusual thing about the dropping of the first atomic bomb. That bomb was dropped on May the 18th, 1945. And if you add the numbers up, they total 33. May is the 5th month of the year, and if you then add the numbers together of the two dates, the 18 and the 1945, you get a total of 33. 5 plus the 1 in 18, added to the 8, the 1 again, the 9, the 4, and the 5, total 33. Another amazing coincidence concealing the number 33. But the most astonishing coincidence of the major event that happened on the 33rd parallel is that it passes just over the city of Dallas, Texas, where in 1963 President John Kennedy was assassinated. Now, this is an overhead shot of Dealey Plaza where the president was shot. The car the president was riding in came in from the lower right side about 4 o'clock, turned to the right, going north, went towards the Texas School Book Depository, the building under number 1 there if you can see it, and then turned left down the elm underneath the overpass to the left. It was while the car in which the president was riding was going off to the left on Elm Street that he was assassinated. The significant thing about that site is that President Kennedy drove right by an obelisk, a Masonic symbol. This is a photograph of the obelisk in that park just in front of the School Book Depository where the Warren Commission that studied the assassination said the assassin fired the shots from. At the base of that obelisk, there is a plaque that says that Dealey Plaza was the site of the first Masonic Lodge in Texas. It reads, within this small park was built the first fraternal lodge. Now I want to be honest with you, the plaque does not say that this is the site of the first Masonic Lodge. It says that it is the site of the first fraternal lodge. But I believe the evidence of Texas being a Masonic state is such to make anyone believe that Dealey Plaza is the site of the first Masonic Lodge in Texas. The state of Texas was created by Masons. This is an article in a Masonic magazine that says that their state flag was designed by a Mason. The symbol of the star of the state of Texas is a lone star, and the star has been a concealed symbol of the morning star for thousands of years. Sam Houston, Davy Crockett, Jim Bowie, and many of the other defenders of the Alamo were all members of the Masonic Lodge. So John Kennedy, the nation's first Catholic president, was brought to the Masonic state of Texas to be assassinated on November the 22nd, 1963. November is the 11th month of the year, and if you add that number to the number of the day he was assassinated, the 22, you get a concealed 33. To show you that there is reason to believe that the Masons were directly involved in the assassination of President John Kennedy, I'd like to lay down a little foundation work so that you can understand why I believe that way. The Masons trace their history from the past to the Knights Templar, a Masonic-like group that was active in the early 1300s. This is a book written by Michael Howard called The Occult Conspiracy. On page 36 of that book, the author says this: on 22 November, meaning the 22nd of November, 1307, the Pope, meaning Pope Clement V, issued a bull. A bull is an official paper issued by the Pope asking that the Catholics obey his rulings to all Christian rulers in Western Europe, ordering them to arrest any member of the order, meaning the Knights Templar, residing in their countries. Pope Clement V had discovered that the Knights Templar were out to destroy not only the Catholic religion, but the nations of Western Europe. And he was warning the Catholic rulers of those nations that if they didn't start arresting these rulers, they would lose their kingdoms. So an arresting of the leaders of the Knights Templar started all over Europe. Jacques de Molay, the leader of the Knights Templar at the time, was arrested, tried, and later burned at the stake for his treasonous activities against the Church and the nations of Europe. Jacques de Molay was brought before the Commission examining the Knights Templar 2 years later in 1309 and asked if he wished to defend his order against the accusations against it. Mr. Howard continues. On March the 11th of 1314, Jacques de Molay was burnt to death at the stake. Notice that March is the 3rd month of that year, and if you multiply 3 times the number of the day he was murdered, you get a 33. Just before he died, Jacques de Molay died. It has been reported that de Molay said that King Philip of France would be summoned to his maker within 12 months and the Pope before 40 days. Pope Clement died on the 20th of April and Philip died on the 29th of November. Both dates were within the predicted times given by Jacques de Molay. It appears that the Knights Templar took vindictive retaliation against those who persecuted their leader. And that thought was confirmed by Albert Pike on page 151 of his book entitled Agenda. And thus the warfare against the powers of evil that crushed the order of the temple goes steadily on. The warfare against the powers of evil that crushed the order, that's the Catholic Church. So he's saying that the warfare against the Catholic Church goes steadily on. And freedom marches onward, ever onward, toward the conquest of the world. Now he's talking about freedom here, meaning the freedom from religion, and they're trying to destroy the Catholic Church. I didn't say that. That's on page 151 of his book entitled Agenda, written by Albert Pike, perhaps the greatest Mason of all time. So Masonry is still at war against religion and government, the two powers that took the life of Jacques de Molay. Is it possible that on November the 22nd, 1963, the Masons participated in the assassination of the first Catholic president? John Kennedy was the first Catholic president of the United States for the same reason. I believe so, because John Kennedy was this nation's first Catholic president. He embodied in one person the power of both the Catholic Church and the presidency. And according to Mr. Pike, Masonry wars against both Catholicism and government. So the question to be answered is, was John Kennedy killed by the Masons, in part, at a site of the first Masonic Lodge in the state of Texas, formed by Masons, and near the obelisk, a concealed symbol of the Masonic Lodge, and under the 33rd degree parallel in Dallas, Texas? And I think so. It is now clearly established that Lee Harvey Oswald did not shoot President Kennedy. I show all of the evidence that it is simply not true that he did on this video that I have made called the Kennedy assassination. And the members of the Warren Commission who said that he did knew that he couldn't have shot the president. There is now abundant photographic evidence that the Warren Commission knew that Mr. Oswald did not shoot the president, yet they said that he did. Is it any coincidence that Warren Commission members, Gerald Ford, Earl Warren, and Senator Richard Russell, and J. Edgar Hoover, the head of the FBI, who all participated in the cover-up of the Kennedy assassination, were all members of the Masonic Lodge? These men, I believe, were aware that Masons participated in the assassination of the president, and that as Masons, they had taken an oath to protect their involvement by knowingly covering up that involvement. I want to make it clear in one sentence, I believe the Masons participated directly in the assassination of President John Kennedy. One of the reasons they did so was because the president was a Catholic, and I believe that they did so because it was another form of retribution against the Catholics for their past prosecution of Jacques de Molay. And I am certain that there are critics who say that I see the involvement of the Masons concealed everywhere, and that is true, but I think I have reason to make that charge. I'd now like to continue my discussion of the concealed worship of the sun worship. Concealed symbolism of the sun worship. This is a picture of a touring group of dancers and singers from Mexico called the Ballet Folklorico de Mexico. Notice, if you will, the huge sun symbol behind them. If you count the number of rays emanating from the center, you count 32 of them. And the circle inside the symbol of the sun would become 33. This is a similar use of the 32 rays and the circle in the center for a total of 33. This is a Mayan stone found in the Yucatan area. It shows that the Mayans were not ignorant of the symbology of the numbers 32 and 33. And it employs the same symbology as does the Catholic monstrance, which we'll look at in a minute. 32 rays and a circle for a total of 33. This is a drawing of the Zuni sun god. It also has 32 rays sticking out from the central circle, a symbol of the sun. So the total of the rays in the circle would, of course, be 33. This is a similar use of the number 32 by the Indians. This is a Hopi Indian Hopi Indian earth ball drawn by a Hopi Indian artist on a piece of buckskin. And it shows a series of 32 small X's around the symbol of Tawa, the Hopi sun god. So some of the Hopi Indians are familiar with the numbers 32 and 33. This is a more modern use of the circle and the numbers 32. This is the General Assembly building of the United Nations, and above the room is a huge circle with 32 lights inside the second ring. 32 plus the circle is 33. I am certain that there are viewers who say that I'm making too much out of the Masonic numbers, 32 and the circle being the symbol of the sun. And I would expect that those critics would say that they do not know if I am right or wrong. So only those who wear the regalia or use the symbols in their life know for sure. This is the historic railroad depot in Douglas, Arizona, a city near Tucson, my hometown. This building has been converted into a police station, and all of the police and other officials of the city will be working under this dome in the center of the building. If you count the divisions, you will count 32 of them, with the circle in the middle becoming the 33rd division. You can even get the numbers 32 and 33 on your bed. A manufacturer advertised this wooden bed in our local newspaper, and there are two sun symbols, one at the head and the other at the foot of the bed. There are 32 divisions, and the circle around them would be the 33rd division. This article shows that the number 33 shows up in the darndest places. The state of Arizona was proposing that voters could vote any time within a 33-day waiting period. The article does not say why they had selected a 33-day voting period rather than the customary 30-day period, meaning 1 month. But I am trying to build a case that this Lucifer worship is worldwide and that these symbols are all around us, and we often go without noticing that fact. What I'm trying to show you is that these Masonic numbers of 32 and 33 are everywhere and that they are often concealed. I am showing you that these numbers have universal use around the worship of the sun god. All cultures seem to conceal the numbers 32 and 33 around their worship of the sun god. It is not just the Masons. This is a picture that shows a pair of obelisks at the temple of Amun, the sun god, at Heliopolis, Egypt. One of these obelisks was brought to London, England, there it is, and the other of these two obelisks at the sun temple at Heliopolis was brought to New York Central Park in 1880. I have found no explanation as to why these two obelisks were brought to New York and London, but I do know that I do know that it was the Masons who arranged for their removal from Egypt. The Masons say that these two obelisks were a gift of the Egyptian government. This is another picture of twin obelisks, this time at the Temple of Karnak, north of Luxor, Egypt. And this temple was built for the worship of Ra, the sun god. And this is another article discussing the location of another set of twin obelisks, once again connected to Egypt. These are claimed to be the oldest obelisks in the world, allegedly over 4,300 years old. They were at the outside of a funeral temple dedicated to Queen Pepi I, who the inscriptions claim ascended to godhood after her death. This is a picture of twin columns on a Masonic lodge. I believe that these twin columns are in symbolic form, representing the twin obelisks of a sun temple. This is a picture of the twin obelisks on the front of the Skull and Bones building at Yale University. There are reports that the Skull and Bones fraternity is connected to the Illuminati of 1776. So these twin obelisks are everywhere, all around us. We walk by and pay no attention. This next section will offend the Catholics once again. I'm going to show you slides of various Catholic churches and show you how they are connected to this concealed worship of Lucifer through the obelisk. But let me warn the Protestants, your time is coming as well. Let me show you how this conspiracy has been concealing symbols all around us, and that as we go about our daily lives, we fail to notice these symbols and what they mean. Remember that the twin obelisks in front of the temples of the sun god, they were on each side of the front door and invited the sun god into the temple. The Catholic Church started building these cathedrals, these Gothic cathedrals, in the late 1100s and continued through about 1530. This style of architecture has been called the Gothic style and is extremely beautiful. This is a slide of a picture showing the Gothic Cathedral of Cologne, Germany. Mackey's Encyclopedia says this about this particular Gothic cathedral. In this cathedral, the symbolic principles of Gothic architecture, the distinguishing style of the Freemasons, were carried out in deeper significance than in any other building of the time. I do not know what those symbolic principles were, but at the very least one can see the extensive use of the obelisk all over the exterior of the building. But it is interesting for the Masons to admit that they built their symbols into a Catholic church. And these symbols are not Christian, they are Masonic. This is the Cathedral of Chartres, I guess, in France. It also has the twin obelisks, as do many of the other Gothic cathedrals. This is St. Patrick's Church in New York City. This Gothic cathedral is characterized by two giant spires in front of the church. I believe that these twin spires are a concealed symbol of the twin obelisk in front of the sun god temple. Each of the two spires on this church is 330 feet high, once again a concealed 33. This is the Catholic Church in Medjugorje, I don't know how to pronounce that, I believe in Yugoslavia, where it is alleged that the Virgin Mary is appearing. These twin spires certainly do look like obelisks. This is the Catholic Church in Mexico. Here the twin obelisks are a little more stylized. This is the beautiful Catholic church near Tucson, Arizona, called Sanavir del Bac. Notice here that this old church also has twin spires in front. The one on the right is not completed, and the legend has it that it was not completed because the Spanish government taxed only completed structures. And if they did not complete the spires, the church would not be completed and hence not taxed. Here is another offending use of the numbers 32 and 33. Catholics, this is not very pleasant, but we've got to look at the truth of wherever it is. This is a picture of the current Pope John Paul II holding a thing the Catholics call a monstrance. This beautiful object is intended to hold what the Catholics call the host, a thin, round wafer representing the body of Christ used in the communion ceremony. If you count the rays sticking out from the circle in the center, you will count 32 of them. And if you add the circle as being one, you will find that the monstrance has a concealed 33 in it. 32 rays plus the circle of the sun is equal to 33. This is a brief article that was in the People magazine a couple of years ago, 1985 to be precise. It said that the current Pope wore a cassock, the long white gown that he wears that contains a traditional 32 buttons. That means that the Pope, no matter whether he is tall or short, wears a cassock with the same number of buttons on it. This is a full-length picture of Pope John Paul II wearing the traditional cassock. I took that picture, put it on my Xerox machine, and made a photocopy of it, a black and white copy of course, and then I could mark all of the buttons with a red dot, and I counted precisely 32 of them. The Pope's head would become the 33rd button on top of the 32 buttons. The head is the seat of man's ability to reason. As I've said, it would become the 33rd vertebrae on top of the spinal column, and I'm asking you, is it a coincidence? Once again, I'm certain that there are those critics who say that I see this concealed 33 everywhere, and of course that is true. But I believe it is that I understand the reasons for it, and I'm now looking for the concealed symbol, and I want you to know, as I'm showing you, I find it everywhere. There is one other interesting thing about the clothing that the Pope wears. This is the page in the dictionary that discusses the headdress worn by the Pope. It is called a mitre. Notice that just underneath the picture of the Pope's headdress, there is a picture of another mitre, a 90-degree joint formed by two joined pieces of wood or metal. This is a picture of the current Pope wearing the mitre hat. And this is the Masonic symbol of the square and the compass. So here we have the compass with the two legs extended and a mitre, a square, underneath it. The word for the headdress worn by the Pope is a mitre. Another word for the square would be a mitre. I'm certain it is just another coincidence. And I would like to provide you with some evidence that Pope John Paul II is a member of the Masons himself. Hold on, Catholics, this is not pleasant. This is once again a copy of Duncan's ritual. This book has printed the actual ritual that the initiate Mason goes through in the first 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge. This is called the grip of an entered apprentice. This modified handshake is used by one Mason to secretly identify himself to another Mason as being a member of the lodge. Notice that in this drawing, the hand of the man on the right is pressing upon the top knuckle of the hand on the left. This is called the pass grip of a fellow craft Mason, meaning it is the secret handshake of the 2nd degree Mason. Notice here that the man on the right is pressing the man's second knuckle. And this is the pass grip of a master Mason, meaning the secret handshake of the 3rd degree Mason. Here the man on the right is pressing the 3rd knuckle of the man on the left. This is a picture of the Emperor Akihito in Japan greeting the Pope in September of 1993. And this is a close-up of that handshake. And here we can see that the Emperor has his thumb on the knuckle of the Pope. This is not a normal handshake, but it is one of the 3 Masonic handshakes. I'd like to show you now a series of photographs that I took from the television coverage of Pope John Paul's visit to Denver, Colorado, also in September of 1993. This is a photograph of President Bill Clinton on the left and the Pope on the right as they greeted each other after the Pope had walked down the gangway from his airplane. Notice that this picture shows them shaking hands. This is a close-up of that handshake, and it appears as if the Pope's thumb is not in a position where it should be if he was giving Bill Clinton the traditional handshake. It is curved as if it could have been given to Bill, as if he could have been given Bill the recognition sign. But let's be fair, it's not on the knuckle, so we can't say. The television camera did not show the two until after they had already given each other a handshake, so we cannot know if the Pope's hand has moved up on Clinton's hand. All we can say at this time is that it appears not to be a traditional handshake and very nearly like one of the Masonic order. Because if the Pope's thumb is curved as if he had wanted to give the President a Masonic handshake, because it is curved rather. So we will never know, at least in this instance, because the camera got there too late. But others gave the Pope a Masonic handshake just a few minutes later. May I ask you, if you're watching this video now, to start watching the handshakes of our national and worldwide leaders and start noticing whether you see this Masonic handshake being given more often. And we can now then start to identify perhaps some of these Masons around the world. After the Pope arrived, he went along a greeting line of cardinals and other dignitaries. This is a slide of what appears to be a businessman, and he's giving the Pope a Masonic handshake to the first knuckle of the Pope. I want to show you some other slides showing others giving the Pope a traditional handshake to show that these other handshakes are out of the ordinary. This is once again another civilian giving what appears to be a normal handshake. Notice that the thumb of the civilian is straight across and not bent at the knuckle. So it appears that this man is not a member of the Masonic Lodge. This is a slide of a priest giving what appears to be a normal handshake, although the Pope's hand is covering up the priest's hand. But his thumb of the priest appears to be straight, but it is difficult to tell. This is a clear Masonic handshake being given to the cardinal, given by this cardinal to the Pope. The cardinal's thumb appears to be on the Pope's second knuckle. This appears to be another priest giving the Pope a normal handshake. Notice that his thumb is straight on the top of the Pope's hand. This is a slide of a civilian giving the Pope a Masonic handshake. He might be a government official because that is Congresswoman Patricia Schroeder just to his right. This is Secretary of Commerce Ron Brown giving what appears to be the Masonic handshake. This thumb is on what appears to be the Pope's third knuckle. This is another priest giving the Pope a Masonic handshake. Notice that his thumb is clearly on the Pope's third knuckle. And I think this is the last slide in this sequence. This is a woman giving the Pope a Masonic handshake. Her thumb is clearly on the Pope's third knuckle. So here we can see that some of the dignitaries were clearly giving the Pope a Masonic handshake and others were not. But even with this evidence, it is still not possible to say that the Pope is a Mason. There simply is not enough evidence. I would like to continue my discussion of the obelisk as a concealed symbol of the ancient mystery religion. This is a picture of the new Mormon temple in San Diego, California. This is a more stylized use of the twin obelisks, but it appears that someone knew what the twin obelisks meant and have incorporated them into their design of the new temple. So even the Mormon temples use the twin obelisks in their buildings. And there is another connection to the hidden worship of Lucifer built into this Mormon temple. This is a close-up of the area underneath one of the obelisks. Notice that there are 7 dark panels and 6 light panels in between them. 7 and 6 make a total of 13, the hidden concealed number of Lucifer. It appears as if someone at the Mormon temple knows about the connection between the twin obelisks and the magic number 13. Some of the Catholic churches do not use the 2 spires. Some use only one, like this one, the 13th century cathedral at Glasgow. This is the Basilica of Our Lady of Fatima. Notice that it only uses one spire in the front of the church. And this is a picture of some students at Holy Cross Catholic University. The article had a quote in it that said there was a growing concern by many that U.S. Catholic colleges and universities are abandoning their religious roots. Maybe the reason that Holy Cross is losing its religious roots is because they have obelisks on the campus inviting the sun god to take residence there. Remember that the obelisk is a symbol of the very presence of the sun god himself. And here we see this concealed symbol on the campus of a Catholic university. Here is a similar use of a twin towers, this time near the Muslim site near Mecca. The obelisks do not have to be 4-sided. They can also be rounded or in column shape. This is a picture of the Blue Mosque in Istanbul. Notice the use of 2 Masonic symbols, the rounded dome, meaning the circle for the sun god, and the rounded obelisk. This is the Mosque of Suleiman the Magnificent. They also use the dome and the rounded obelisk. And this is the St. Sophia Museum in Istanbul. It uses the same 2 Masonic symbols, the rounded dome and the obelisk. This is another example showing you that concealed symbols to this Lucifer worship are in other face. This is the Cao Dai Temple in, I believe, Vietnam. Here we see not only the twin obelisk in front, but we see 2 other concealed symbols. Each of the twin obelisks appear to have 7 layers on them, meaning the concealed perfection of the number 7. But the architect appears to have built in 13 columns on the side of the temple. So here we see 3 Masonic symbols in one building. And this might be the reason why. This is a slide on the inside of the Cao Dai Temple, and here we see the all-seeing eye on a rounded sun-like globe. This temple appears to have been built by a member of the Scottish Rite Masonic Lodge. But we Protestants also build obelisks on our churches. This is a single obelisk on a single Protestant church in rural America. But I want to show you a slide that will make a point that it is not necessary to put obelisks on church buildings. This is a slide of a Baptist church here in Tucson that has no obelisk on the entirety of the building, and certainly not one on top. So it is not necessary to attach this symbol to Lucifer worship onto a church building. The obelisk is not only used on churches, it is also used on monuments. This is the George Washington Masonic National Memorial Monument, built as a, quote, fitting monument to commemorate the greatness of George Washington. The columns in front of the Masonic National Memorial Monument are exactly 33 feet high. The monument is called a beacon of light in an otherwise dark world. This is the front page of a tax form showing what is called the Carpenter's Hall, used by the Continental Congress in 1774. If you look closely at the top of the spire on the top, you will see a small square and compass. It has been placed upside down, but there is no mistaking the Masonic square and compass on the top of this building. These obelisks are often used to mark the location of an important date in American history. This obelisk is at Independence Hall, where our founding fathers met to write the Constitution, I believe. Here is an obelisk at Concord Bridge, where an important battle took place in the American Revolution. This is another obelisk at the Bunker Hill Monument. Here are several obelisks built into the memorial around where Abraham Lincoln delivered his brilliant speech at the Gettysburg battlefield during the Civil War. As far as I can tell, Abraham Lincoln was not a member of the Masonic Lodge. This is the Revolutionary Monument at Lexington, Massachusetts. Notice once again the use of an obelisk to mark the site of a Revolutionary War battle. This is a round obelisk at the site of the Boston Massacre during the American Revolution. This is a pair of obelisks near Copley Square in Boston, Massachusetts. The obelisk is often used to mark the burial site of a Mason. This particular one is in Boston, Massachusetts, in a cemetery there. This one is also in a cemetery near Boston, Massachusetts, to show you that it is not necessary to be buried under an obelisk. You can see the Christian cross in the background on the left side, where a Christian is probably buried there. Now, to show you that the obelisk is also used to mark an important site in another religion, this is an obelisk to mark the birth site of the Mormon leader Joseph Smith. It is claimed that Joseph Smith was a Christian, but notice that the Mormons did not build a cross. They built an obelisk to mark the site of his birth. It is known that Joseph Smith was a member of the Masonic Lodge, even though he frequently spoke out about secret societies. I'll talk more about this connection between Masonry and Mormonism a little later. The obelisk is often used to mark important governmental sites. This is the clock tower known as Big Ben, and it is attached to the Parliament building in London, England. And this is an obelisk attached to the City Hall in Gdansk, Poland. Here's the obelisk once again as part of the Canadian Parliament building in Ottawa. And here are some obelisks in Moscow, Russia. So we can see that the obelisk is worldwide. Here's a Buddhist shrine in Vietnam. Notice that the shrine has 7 layers on it, and 7 is the number of perfection or completion. Albert Pike told us what the number 7 signified. He wrote this on page 782 of his book entitled Morals and Dogma. Therefore, the 7 steps which lead up to the outer court of the temple are the emblem of the 7-fold light which we need to possess before we can arrive at the height of knowledge. And on page 102 of his book, entitled Legenda, Albert Pike wrote this: "The only thing that neither moves nor is moved is the most ancient ruler and chief, of whom the number 7 may pertinently be called an image." So it appears that the number 7 is the number of Lucifer. This is the largest obelisk in the world, located in Washington, D.C. It is called the Washington Monument, erected in memory of George Washington, who, as we've seen before, was a very visible Mason. This is not truly an obelisk because it is constructed of 36,000 separate blocks. This is a drawing of the monument showing that it is not one single block, but actually consists of many small blocks. All true obelisks are made of a single piece of stone, but the Washington Monument is a collection of many stones. The Washington Monument has a 3,300-pound capstone, and as I said, the number 33 is a symbolic number to the Masons. In fact, Helena Petrovna Blavatsky says that the number 33 is a sacred number. The Washington Monument played an interesting and concealed part in the movie called JFK. In an interesting and concealed part in the movie JFK, made by Oliver Stone, the movie director. And I believe the reason it did was because Mr. Stone knew about the involvement of certain members of the Masons in the assassination of President Kennedy. In the movie, District Attorney Jim Garrison, portrayed by Kevin Costner, shown here on the right, met with the mysterious Colonel X, played by Donald Sutherland, on the left. Notice that they met in front of the Lincoln Memorial. You can just see the outline of Lincoln's head off to the left. That is the statue of President Lincoln in the left background. It is interesting to recall that President Lincoln was shot by John Wilkes Booth, shown here in this photograph, and Mr. Booth was a member of the Masons as well. The Colonel and Garrison start their conversation by walking out into the rain into the grassy park in front of the Lincoln Memorial. As they start their walk towards the park, Stone pans up and shows the moviegoer the Washington Monument. These two gentlemen sit down on a bench, shown here off on the left on the horizon, and Oliver Stone shows us that meeting with the Washington Monument directly behind them. You might not be able to see it on this slide, but it's off to the left, just to the left of these two gentlemen seated on the bench. And in another scene, a little closer than the last one, showing the two men together, Stone shows, once again, the Washington Monument. Colonel X starts walking away after their conversation is closed, and he starts walking towards the Washington Monument. I believe that Oliver Stone was telling us in a concealed manner that the Masons were somehow involved in the assassination of the president, because I believe that Mr. Stone knows. The obelisk is being used in construction all over America. This is a picture of the obelisk built into the University of Arizona building called the Old Main. This is a picture of a restaurant here in Tucson, and the architect built an obelisk into the center of the building. This is an obelisk of the same shopping center. You could make an argument that this is not an obelisk, but a clock placed on an object that looks like an obelisk, and I will accept that, except that he used the obelisk 3 times in the construction of this shopping center. So I believe that the architect knew what it meant. This is the shopping center here in Tucson that was recently remodeled. Notice that the architect used 4 obelisks and pyramids in the new construction. This is a rather dark photograph of Tucson's community center, and notice that they used 3 pyramids on the building. Obelisks and pyramids are showing up everywhere, both in new buildings and in remodeled buildings, because apparently architects are trying to tell us something. I'd now like to go back to my study of the Masonic Lodge. This is a picture of a book entitled Born in Blood by John Robinson. As I said before, I had the very distinct pleasure of meeting and debating Mr. Robinson on television in Tampa, Florida a few years ago. This particular television program had an audience of about 100 people, and all were members of the Masons. This was a very difficult time in my career, but I went prepared to document my charges by actually bringing the books I was quoting from with me. The Masons did not like that. Apparently a critic of the Masons cannot use their own information. Mr. Robinson's book contends that Freemasonry had its beginning in an organization called the Order of the Knights Templar. They started their organization during the 1300s. He is claiming that the current Masons can trace their history back to the Knights Templar. That thought was given some credence by Albert Pike on page 820 of his book entitled Morals and Dogma. This is what Mr. Pike wrote. Before his execution, the chief of the doomed order, and of course here he's referring to Jacques de Molay, the head at that time of the Knights Templar, organized and instituted what afterwards came to be called Scottish Masonry. Mr. Robinson adds an intriguing thought in his book. He adds this comment that during the Master Mason 3rd degree ritual, the initiate is told, "This degree will make you a brother to pirates and corsairs." The word corsair is French for pirate. This is, of course, a drawing of the pirate flag. Notice that it is a drawing of a skull detached from the body and the 2 leg bones. It is known that the Knights Templar in the 1300s owned 18 fighting ships berthed in the naval base at La Rochelle on the French coast. After the persecution of the Knights Templar by the Catholic Church started, these 18 ships sailed and became the pirates shown in all of those swashbuckling movies. Is it possible that Errol Flynn and Douglas Fairbanks, who portrayed pirates in the movies, were actually portraying Knights Templars who were actively plundering those who persecuted the secret organization? The pirates did plunder the persecutors of the Knights Templar. They persecuted by destroying the ships of the Catholic Church and the government. Could it be that this explains the past about the pirates shown in our movies? Could it be that it was the Masonic Lodge who sailed the ships under the pirate flag to plunder both the Catholic Church and the governments of Europe who prosecuted their leader? It is an interesting observation that makes a great deal of sense. This is a reproduction of the book cover used by a secret fraternity at Yale University called Skull and Bones. Each year, 15 juniors are invited into this secret fraternity by the departing seniors of the group. Notice that their symbol is a symbol of a skull and bones. Here is one of their most famous members. This is George Bush, who is a member of Skull and Bones. Actually, another writer on the Masonic Order, in this case a member of the Masons, has traced the history of the Masons back even earlier than John Robinson did. This is the frontispiece of a book entitled Freemasonry and the Ancient Gods. All I have is a copy of the book since it was printed in 1921 and is now out of print. The author, Mr. J.S.M. Ward, is a master Mason, and this is what he writes. The theory I venture to propound is that Freemasonry originated in the primitive initiatory rites of prehistoric man, and from those rites have been built up in all of the ancient mysteries. Modern Masonry has become the repository of the hidden wisdom of the ancients. So he is proposing that Freemasonry can trace its history all the way back to the very earliest history of mankind. Next, I'd like to discuss the significance of the number 13 to the Masons. This is a page from a Masonic magazine entitled The New Age, in which the Masons discuss the mystical number 13. The article says that in the number used repeatedly in both sides of the Great Seal of the United States was not a coincidence. They talked about the fact that there were 13 leaves in the olive branches, 13 bars and stripes on the shield, 13 arrows in the eagle's claw, 13 stars in the green crest above the seal, and 13 layers of stone in the pyramid shown on both sides of the Great Seal. Notice that the Masons are claiming that the number is one of their numbers. Those who do not see the significance of the Masonic number 13 claim that it stands for the 13 states in the Union at the time of the Declaration of Independence. But the Masons appear to be claiming that the Founding Fathers waited until there were precisely 13 states to form the Union. They did not create the United States when there were 12 or 14 states. They created the Union when there were precisely 13 states as a way of concealing their involvement. Let me show you just how significant the number 13 is to the planners on the eagle side of the Great Seal. It appears as if the Masons, as we've already covered, selected the eagle because, and here's another reason why they selected the bird, the words American eagle have 13 letters in them. The words E pluribus unum have 13 letters in them. On the pyramid side of the Great Seal, the words annuit septis, the Latin words on the top of the circle, have 13 letters. There are a total of 39 letters on the reverse side of the seal. 39 when divided by 3 equals 13. There are a lot of other concealed uses of the number 13 around the time of the founding of this nation. This is a popular flag of the American Revolution. It says, an appeal to God. Those words have 13 letters. The words, don't tread on me, have 13 letters. And notice the snake wrapped around the tree. This is once again a symbol of the sun god, the serpent talked about and discussed in the first book of the Bible. And lastly, the tree appears to be an evergreen tree, one that would not lose its leaves during the winter when the sun worshippers fear that their god is dying. And this might be of some importance. The Star-Spangled Banner, this nation's national anthem, was based upon a song called Anacreon in Heaven, written by a Mason. And Albert Pike added another clue that the American flag is itself of Masonic origin. He wrote this in his book entitled Agenda. The triangles of the visible and invisible world are always interlaced. Of the 3 interlaced triangles of the highest masonry, one is white, one blue, and one red. So the American flag used the colors of the Masonic Lodge. Also, Betsy Ross, the woman who sewed the first American flag together, was married to John Ross, a member of the Masonic Lodge. The actual date that the Founding Fathers chose to declare their independence from the British government also has Masonic significance. The words July the 4th have 13 letters. I'll show you other concealed symbolism on the date July the 4th in a few moments. The year 1776 has a concealed 13 in it as well. If you add the last 2 numbers of the year 1776, meaning if you add the 7 to the 6, you'll get, obviously, the number 13. This was no accident, as I will show. If you multiply the number 13 by itself, you get 169. If you add the traditional founding of this nation as 1607, when the Pilgrims came to America, and add 169, meaning the concealed multiplication of 13 by itself, you get 1776, the year that America founded this nation. If you add the concealed 169 to 1776, the founding day of this nation, you will get the year 1945, the year that Harry Truman, the 33rd degree Mason, dropped the atomic bombs on the Christians in Japan. Our founding fathers declared their independence in 1776, but did not create their first government until 1789. They waited precisely 13 years to form America's federal government. George Washington had 12 other generals plus himself for a total of 13. A total of 13 people worked on the Great Seal of the United States. The United States Navy had a committee of 13 controlling all naval affairs. It had 13 ships in the First Fleet. Now this is the flag, as you will recognize, of the Confederate States used during the Civil War. Notice that there are 13 stars on it. If the number 13 was used, as it was in the American flag, to signify one star for each state, there would only be 11 stars on this flag, since there were only 11 states in the Confederation. The argument cannot be made that the Confederacy was waiting for 2 more states to join the Confederation, because this flag was adopted in 1863, about in the middle of the war. 11 states started the war in the Southern Confederation, and 11 states finished it. And this is a more modern use of the number 13. This is a recent photograph of President Bill Clinton in the White House. Notice the bookcase in the back wall behind him. There are 13 scallops inside the semicircle. I'd like to show you 2 more current examples of the number 13 in the business world. This is the symbol of American Tel-and-Tel, telephone and telegraph, obviously. The circle has 13 lines in it, plus the circle is and has been a symbol of the sun. And this is the symbol of Time Life Incorporated. It has 6 triangles pointing one way and 7 pointing the other. 6 plus 7 equals 13, so they, like AT&T, are concealing the use of the number 13 in their logo. As I've been trying to show you, the number 13 is concealed everywhere. And to make my point that sometimes state flags conceal Masonic symbolism in them, I'd like to show you the beautiful flag of the state of Arizona, my home state. This flag utilizes the single star as its centerpiece, and as we just read, it is a Masonic symbol of the sun and the sun god. If you count the number of rays coming from the single star in the middle, you will count 13 of them. This is unfortunately a rather dark slide showing a Masonic magazine showing a picture with similar rays coming from the top of the pyramid. If you count those rays, there are precisely 13 of them. Notice, going back to the flag, that the star is copper colored. Those who live in Arizona would surely say that the star on the state flag is copper colored because of the huge amounts of the copper mined in the state. But I believe a far more satisfactory explanation is the one offered by Aleister Crowley, a Satanist. This is the first of 2 pictures of this man I would like to show you. Notice that he is using a strong light in front of him to make a shadow on the wall behind him. The shadow, made by his fingers, looks like a horned devil. Since Mr. Crowley was a Satanist, one can fairly presume that this shadow is what Mr. Crowley felt the devil looked like. Crowley wrote this about his worship of the sun god Lucifer in his book entitled Liber Semek, I guess. I don't know how to pronounce that, but that's the best I can do. O breathing, flowing sun, I invoke thee, the terrible and invisible God, who dwellest in the void places of the spirit. Notice that Mr. Crowley, like Albert Pike, believed that Lucifer was a god. This is the second picture of Mr. Crowley. Look at the strange way that he is holding his arms. This is a rather strange way to have your picture taken. I do not know this, but it appears as if he is holding his arms in this manner, so that his 2 arms represent the 2 obelisks outside the sun temples of Egypt. If that is true, he is inviting the sun god, Lucifer, into his temple, the body. It is commonly known that Aleister Crowley was a Luciferian, so this explanation makes sense. He can invite the sun god to come between the two columns, just like the two obelisks outside invite the sun god into the temple. And to show you that this is not at all unusual, this is a slide showing a picture of Gloria Steinem, one of today's well-known advocates of the women's liberation movement. This picture was on a cover of Parade magazine. Notice that she is too holding up her two arms just like Aleister Crowley. Notice that she has also turned her hands so that we can see the rings on her fingers. And this is a close-up of her hands. Notice also that on each hand she has snakes coiled around the same finger. This is what is Gloria Steinem telling us? I cannot say for certain, but it looks like she is trying to tell us something, just like Aleister Crowley tried to tell us in his photograph with his arms in a similar manner. But going back to Arizona, or to the Arizona flag, Mr. Crowley told the world that the copper color was used because it resembled the copper-colored sun when it sets each night. So it appears that the flag of Arizona conceals secret meanings known only to Luciferians and Masons. And the reason I believe it is so is because the state of Arizona, the state in which I live, was directly created by high-ranking Masons. This is an item that appeared in our local newspaper that states that our first Masonic Lodge meeting in Arizona was held in the governor's mansion. But the Masons not only meet in government buildings to conduct their business, the government also meets in Masonic lodges to conduct theirs. This is an article in the spring 1964 Royal Arch Mason magazine that says that Missouri's first Confederate capital in the Civil War was at the Masonic Hall at Neosho, Missouri. The article goes on to say this about Missouri. The Confederate legislature met there on October the 21st through October the 29th, 1861, to pass an act of secession from the Union. This is an article that exposed the fact that the Arizona state flag, talked about in this article, was sewn together by Nan Hayden. Nan Hayden was the wife of former United States Senator Carl Hayden, shown here in this picture receiving a pen from President Lyndon Johnson. That's Carl Hayden, bent over somewhat with the bald head and the glasses. Carl Hayden was a 33rd degree Mason. Other prominent Arizonans in politics are Senator Barry Goldwater and House Minority Leader in the House, former Minority Leader in the House, John Rhodes, who were both 33rd degree Masons. This is an article in the Royal Arch Mason magazine that confirms that both of these political leaders from Arizona were 33rd degree Masons. And here's the bottom of that article. It says that Senator Barry Goldwater and Congressman John J. Rhodes are 33rd degree Scottish Rite Masons. So if you want to go further in government and happen to come from Arizona, it helps to be a 33rd degree Mason. And to further explain how Arizona is a Masonic state, let me remind you that Phoenix is the state capital of my home state. I'm sorry, this slide's upside down. This is a map showing the city in approximately the center. The city of Arizona, of Phoenix rather, is named after the phoenix bird shown here on the cover of a pamphlet published by the Scottish Rite Freemasons. Albert Pike told us about the phoenix in his book entitled Agenda. Connected with light, the sun, and Kirum, I believe that Kirum is another way of saying Harmabith, the builder of Solomon's temple, is that allegorical bird, the phoenix. Like all other symbols, it was invented to conceal, and its meaning, like that of other symbols, is of course not obvious. In Arabia, the phoenix is sacred to the sun. Notice he capitalized the word S, the letter S in the word sun, and you do that when you talk about the sun being a god. Fred Giddings, in his book entitled Secret Teachings in the Occult Art, wrote this. He said, the phoenix bird will live for a period of 500 years, at the end of which it builds a split nest of precious spices. The nest completed, the phoenix sings a doleful song. I'm sorry, the next slide here. The nest completed, the phoenix sings a doleful song and then flaps its wings to set the nest on fire. The bird is then burned to ashes, and from the mass of carbon there miraculously springs to life a new phoenix. We may see in it certain, meaning the myth, in it meaning the myth, certain ideas which must have appealed to them, meaning the occultists like the Masons. The phoenix is linked to the sun. So the phoenix bird is a symbol of a rebirth to the Mason, and the state capital of Arizona is Phoenix, named after the mythical bird that gives rebirth to itself every 500 years. Phoenix is also called the Sun City. It is interesting to notice that others say that the phoenix bird lives for 1,000 years and then destroys itself. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the Luciferian, said this on page 617 of her book entitled The Secret Doctrine. The phoenix lives 1,000 years, after which, kindling a flame, it is self-consumed. This 1,000-year period is extremely significant for reasons that I will make known at the end of this lecture. I would like to return now to my discussion of the the symbolic number 13. This is an advertisement sent to me as an inducement to join the National Museum of the American Indian. This is their symbol shown on the bottom. I'm sorry, let's go back. This is the first one there. That's the application. Here's the symbol on the bottom of their advertisement. Once again, we see 13 rays emanating from the center circle. So here we see the number 13 is a very significant number to the ancient mystery religion. Next, I would like to discuss other uses of the star as a symbol inside the Masonic fraternity. This is the cover of a Masonic Bible. This Bible is apparently a King James Version with some other explanatory notes on Masonry in the first few pages of the Bible. This particular Bible was given to me by a man in Florida. The picture in the middle shows a young Jesus apparently teaching the teachers inside the temple. And to show you that this Bible is Masonic, this is a page inside the Bible showing the square and the compass, the two symbols of Masonic Lodge. And this is a close-up of the lower right-hand corner of the cover of this Bible. And it shows a star with one point down. Now, it's kind of hard to see because it's imprinted very narrowly in gold. But we're going to talk about that star on the cover of the Masonic Bible. The traditional showing of the star is with one point up and two sides down. So it is now becomes important to study the star as a Masonic symbol. This is a book entitled A History of Freemasonry and Concordant Orders, written in 1891 by a series of Masonic writers. This is the Board of Editors, a list of some 70, 32nd, and 33rd degree Masons who wrote or edited the articles inside the book. So this is official information that one can rely on because it was written or edited by some very high-ranking Masons. This is a part of page 49 of that book, and it explains the differences between the two stars. Notice that the star on the left was drawn with 2 points down, and the one on the right was drawn with 1 point down. Also, the one on the right has a goat. We'll cover that in a minute. The article says this, quote, "This star represents good, or God rather, all that is pure, virtuous, and good, when represented with 1 point upward." That's the traditional way, 1 point up, 2 points down. But then the article went on, written by the high-ranking Masons, but when turned with 1 point down, it represents evil, all that is opposed to the good, pure, and virtuous. In fine, the star with 1 point down represents the goat of Mendes. That thought is repeated on page 101 of the same book, and here's page 101, or part of it, and here's what that page says. When the pentagram, and the pentagram of course is a 5-pointed star, elevates 2 of its points, meaning when it shows 1 point down, it represents Satan or the goat of the mysteries. And when it elevates 1 of its points only, meaning when it has 2 points down, it represents the Savior, goodness, and virtue. And here we see the one-pointed star pointed down, the star pointed with 1 point down on the Masonic Bible, on the cover, of the Masonic Bible, and the question is why. This star with one point down is the symbol of the Eastern Star Fraternity, part of the entire Masonic organization. That means that the Masons have placed a satanic star on the cover of the Holy Bible. They have done so willingly because they know what it means when it shows one point down. Notice that I took that information from the Masons themselves. I did not write that. Masons wrote that. Now they talked about the goat of Mendes, and this is a drawing of the goat of Mendes. It's also referred to as Baphomet, or the devil, or Satan the devil. The goat of Mendes was called Baphomet by the Knights Templar, and their leaders were accused of worshiping this god by the Catholic Church in the 1309 persecution of that body. Here is the same drawing of the goat of Mendes on the cover of the book entitled An ABC of Witchcraft, Past and Present. And to confirm that Baphomet is Satan, we can turn to Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the occultist Luciferian, who wrote this on page 389 of her book entitled The Secret Doctrine. She said that Baphomet was the goat-headed Satan. The witches and the Masons know who this goat of Mendes is. He is Lucifer, also known as Satan or the devil, and they put that goat, that star with the goat on it, on the cover of the Masonic Bible. And to confirm that these people connect the goat with Satan, this is a slide of Anton LaVey, the head of the Church of Satan. Notice that he placed himself directly in front of the five-pointed star with one point down. This is a slide taken of the front of the Satanic Bible. Notice that the five-pointed star, once again, is covered on the Bible with one point down. This is a slide taken from the front of a satanic ritual. And once again, the goat inside the star with one point down. And lastly, this is a slide taken of the five-pointed star and a crucifix with the head pointed downward. The cross upside down is the universal sign of a rejection of Christianity, and it is in front of a five-pointed star, a symbol of Lucifer, Satan the devil, and also placed on the cover of the Masonic Bible. This is the tarot card representing the devil. Notice that they use both the goat as a symbol of the devil and the star with one point down. And here we see another example linking the goat with the worship of the devil. Lastly, this is a slide taken off the pin, or taken of the pin, of my social fraternity, which I joined when I was in college. This is a drawing of that pin. Notice that it also has the star with one point downward. And notice that there is a skull and crossbones just above the star, or just inside the star actually, and if you above it rather. And if you count the circles around the circle in the center, you count 12 of them, and the 13th would be the main circle around all of them. This is a drawing of the new fraternity house that my local fraternity is building here in Tucson. Notice that they've conveniently placed an obelisk in front of the building. The obelisk, as you remember, is a symbol of the very presence of the sun god himself. And to show you that others appear to know the significance of the downward pointing star, this is an advertisement for a new clothing style called the New World Order. The customer is encouraged to buy a line of clothing that is different than the clothing of the past. Notice in this picture that on the model's left shoulder there is a star with one point down. This is another slide taken from the catalog showing this new clothing line. Notice that all of the colors utilized are red, white, and black, the three colors of the Masonic Lodge. You might remember that these were the same colors used by Adolf Hitler's Nazi party in Germany during World War II. It appears as if someone knows what all of these names, symbols, and colors mean. I do not know as of this time why the 5 points of the star are significant. One clue might be the fact that Adam Weishaupt had 5 things he wanted to destroy when he created the Illuminati. Perhaps this is the reason that the number 5 is significant to the Masons. Professor Weishaupt wanted to destroy or abolish all religion, all right to private property, the family. He wanted to destroy the right of inheritance and nationalism. So Weishaupt had 5 things he wished to destroy, and maybe that's the reason that the number 5 is significant, because that's what the Illuminati had to destroy to achieve their goal. Or it might be the fact that there are 5 major continents in the world, and since it is the goal of this conspiracy to consolidate their power over all of the 5 continents, meaning a new world order, it might be that that is why the number 5 is significant. Benjamin Krem, in his book, The Reappearance of the Christ and of the Masters of Wisdom, said that there are 5 retreats, as he calls them, where one of these ascended masters visited in 1976. New York, London, Geneva, Darjeeling in India, and Tokyo. Maybe this is the reason that the number 5 is important. There are other concealed uses of the 5-pointed star and other symbols in the things around us. This is a map of the city of Washington, D.C. The White House is shown on the left above the circle, and the Capitol building is shown on the right. Now, this is a descriptive flyer about Washington, D.C. that states that George Washington, the nation's first president, hired Pierre Charles L'Enfant to lay out the city streets when this government created the District of Columbia. Mr. L'Enfant was a major who served under General Washington in the American Revolution and was also a member of the French Masonic Lodge. As I've shown you before, this is a drawing of the Masonic square and compass, their major symbol. And of course, this is just the square and compass turned sideways, the same symbol. And this is a map of Washington, D.C., again, this time with certain roads darkened to show the square and the compass laid over the Capitol building. The Capitol building is inside the partial circle on the right side of the map, and as I've said before, the circle is a symbol of the sun, and there is a partial circle around the Capitol building. Of course, my guess is that they didn't want to make it too apparent, so they concealed the circle by making it only a partial one. This is a copy of the original map of Washington, D.C. laid out by Charles L'Enfant, and you'll notice that there are squares and compasses everywhere in the city, laid out in the streets. This is another map of Washington, D.C. Turned sideways. There is a 5-pointed star with one point down drawn out on the streets around the White House. As we've seen, the 5-pointed star, when one point is down, is a symbol of Satan. I'm certain that these uses of Masonic symbols in the streets of Washington, D.C. is just another coincidence. This is a drawing of President George Washington laying out the cornerstone of the United States Capitol building on September the 18th, 1793. Notice that he is dressed as a Mason and that he is appearing in public with this strange paraphernalia on. So a Mason laid the cornerstone of our Capitol building. But we are told that they are not a significant influence in our public affairs. This is a drawing of another use of the number 13. This drawing is in a book Manly P. Hall, the Mason, who wrote extensively about secret societies. The main ring has a total of 12 circles on it, and the 13th circle is in the hand that reaches down from heaven. The hand in the clouds is definitely not the God of the Bible, because Manly P. Hall was a Luciferian. There are other significant uses of the number 13 in the occult. The Illuminati had 13 degrees inside its rite of initiation. A coven of witches has 13 witches inside each coven. A secret society called the Knights of the Golden Circle that planned and then started the Civil War in America in 1837 had 13 men running its affairs. This is a gallows currently being displayed in the courtyard in Tombstone, Arizona, and the hangman's noose is on the 13th step of the gallows. And I found another interesting connection between the Masonic numbers 13 and 33. I saw a drawing of an art object that reported that it was precisely 13 inches or 33 centimeters high. That means that there is a hidden connection between the metric system of meters and the American system of inches and feet. That connection was confirmed when I read that the metric system was created during the French Revolution of 1789, and that revolution was created and controlled by the Masons of the day. That means that the Masons of France introduced the metric system to the world and concealed a hidden connection between the numbers of 13 and 33. 1 meter is equal to 39.37 inches. Therefore, 1 inch is equal to 0.0254 meters, or 2.54 centimeters. Therefore, 13 inches is equal to 33 centimeters. In other words, our measuring system conceals a hidden Masonic connection between the metric system and the system used in America today. I'd like to bring our study of the number 13 a little closer to the present. The Federal Reserve Bank is comprised of 12 district banks and one Federal Reserve Board for a total of 13. OPEC, the International Cartel of Oil Producers, has 13 members. And this is an article in Newsweek magazine that discusses the Skull and Bones fraternity at Yale University. It reported that Skull and Bones, a secret fraternity on the campus that we've discussed before, is one of 13 secret societies at Yale. Notice that there were precisely 13 secret societies and at Yale University. In 1977, the Esquire magazine said that the Skull and Bones fraternity had definite links to the Illuminati, and George Bush was a member of Skull and Bones. And there's one more name I want to bring to your attention as also being a member of Skull and Bones, and that's William F. Buckley, the so-called conservative. It is interesting to note that Mr. Buckley constantly mocks those who believe in the conspiratorial view of history, as he does in this article in our November 27, 1992 Tucson Citizen evening paper, Conspiracy Theories Seem to Have 9 Lives. He says in this article that Lee Harvey Oswald was the one who fired the fatal shot. In my video entitled The Kennedy Assassination, I prove, notice, I prove by using photographic evidence that Oswald did not fire any bullets that day, fatal or otherwise. You can answer the question yourself as to why Mr. Buckley continues to repeat a lie. I would like to continue my study of the number 13. The witch who wrote the book entitled An ABC of Witchcraft said that 13 is the witch's number. Notice, I didn't say that, the witch said it. 13 is the witch's number. And she went on to say, from its association with witchcraft, the number 13 came to be called the devil's dozen. But perhaps the most salient statement of all was made by Stan Deyo, who is a writer in opposition to this conspiracy. He wrote this: 13 is the value assigned to Satan. And from all the evidence that I have shown you to this point, I would say that he appears to be correct. But there is one more possible explanation for the number 13 being so mysterious. Manly P. Hall writes about there being 12 great religions. These would be the visible ones like Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, etc. The 13th religion, the concealed one, and inside all the other 12, would be the ancient mystery religion, the secret religion, the one dedicated to Lucifer. This might be the best explanation of them all. But the most incriminating connection of the number 13 with evil is when you identify someone with 13 letters in their name. This is a certain sign that that person is totally corrupt, depraved, wicked, and immoral. They are completely devoid of morality. They are totally degenerate, lacking any redeeming value, and are total liars. I did that to make a point, because as my name, Ralph Epperson, does indeed have 13 letters in it. But one day when I was giving this lecture in Tampa, Florida, someone pointed out to me that my name consisted of 13 letters, and I got totally embarrassed. But notice that I had no say in that decision made by my parents. They were the ones who chose my name for me, whether or not it had 13 letters. These Masons had a choice, and they consistently chose 13. They had to know what it meant. They acknowledged it, as we've shown you, as a symbolic number. And that is why it is all around us in a concealed form. Now, this would be my guess as to why the number 13 is so important to the Masons and others. 7 is the number of completion or perfection, and 6 is the number of man. If you add the two together, you get completed man or perfected man. And I think that the number is the concealed number, showing that man can become perfect or complete to the ancient mystery religion or Lucifer worship. But that is just my guess. I've never read that anywhere. However, I did find a similar thought in a little book entitled Symbolism of the Three Degrees by Oliver Day Street, a member of the Masonic Lodge. As I said before, this is official Masonic information because the Lodge book, or rather the book, was presented by the Grand Lodge of the Masonic Order in New Jersey. This is what he says on page 23 in a section entitled Science of Numbers. The soul was made to correspond to the number 6, and 7 was the counterpart of reason and health. The author does not say it, but if you add the two numbers together, you get 13, or a soul improved by reason. Another way of saying this would be to say that 13 is the number of the illuminated soul. However, I do know that there are people on this earth who believe that the illuminated man, the man with superior ability to reason for himself, has evolved farther than the normal man. Man is called Homo sapiens man by those who believe in evolution. Homo sapiens. There are those, however, who believe that they are Homo noeticus man, being a higher form of man, evolved because of his use of reason. One becomes illuminated because he evolves higher than other men when he uses his brain, his power to reason. Now I'd like to return to my discussion of the Masonic involvement in the founding of this nation. There is one more significant insight into why the Founding Fathers chose the date of July the 4th to declare their independence from Great Britain. The old Julian calendar was changed in 1582 by an order of Pope Gregory XIII. This was because the old calendar was 11 days behind the sun. In other words, the old calendar was not accurate in relationship to the actual solar year, and the astronomers were having difficulty in calculating the length of the solar year. So in October of 1582, the old June the 23rd became July the 4th. You might remember that June the 23rd was a solar holiday because it was around the rebirth of the sun god. It was one of the days in the June the 22nd through June the 25th rebirth of the sun after it had gone north for the summer. So the Founding Fathers concealed a holiday to the sun god in their choosing of the date of July the 4th to declare this nation's independence. Lastly, it would be interesting to answer the question as to why Americans shoot off fireworks on that day. Notice that Americans do not celebrate any other holiday by shooting off fireworks. Is it possible that it is because the people in ancient Egypt and Babylon lit fires to worship Baal, the sun god, on June the 24th of each year? I think so. I'd like to return now to the reverse side of the seal. Of course, this is the side with the pyramid. Manly P. Hall, the 33rd degree Mason, wrote this: "The pyramid and the all-seeing eye represent the universal house surmounted by the radiant emblem of the great architect of the universe." Notice that Mr. Hall called our attention to two things in that quote. The pyramid was built as a house. That means that the pyramid was not built as a tomb. It was built as a house for some god. And secondly, the all-seeing eye was a symbol of the god of the Masons called the great architect of the universe. Let me provide you now with the evidence that the God of the Masons is not the God of the Bible. A quote from Albert Pike in his book entitled Morals and Dogma, amongst others, proves that. The God of the Bible is a creator God. He created the universe out of nothing. That statement is in the first book of the Bible, called the book of Genesis. This is what the Bible says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. So the God of the Bible is a creator God because he created something out of nothing. The Masons claim that their God is an architect. They call their God the supreme architect of the universe. Architects do not create, they only plan to build from existing materials. So this God cannot be the same God, or the Masons simply do not understand the English language. They call their God the architect of the universe. And to show you that the Masons know that their God created nothing, let me read you this quote taken from page 254 of Albert Pike's book entitled Morals and Dogma. Mr. Pike says this: Amun, by the way, Amun was the god of Lower Egypt, was the sun god. he created nothing. This is another proof that the great God, the great architect of the universe, the Masonic God, is not the God of the Bible. This is Coyle's Masonic Encyclopedia, written by a 33rd degree Mason named Henry Wilson Coyle. Mr. Coyle's encyclopedia was published by McCoy Publishing and Masonic Supply Company in New York, a major publisher of Masonic literature. On page 494 of his book, Mr. Coyle lists the qualifications a male must possess to become a member of the Masonic Lodge. The words under religious qualifications say, quote, belief in God, or TGAOTU. So a prospective Mason can believe in the God of the Bible or the Masonic God called the great architect of the universe. The letters that he shows, TGAOTU. So this is an admission by 33rd degree Mason Henry Wilson Coyle that this great architect is the God and that he is not the God of the Bible. In other words, you can believe in either of those two gods. Notice that I found this in their own literature. It is not my thought. It is from one of the great Masons of all time, a 33rd degree Mason, one who knows who the great architect is. The Mason can believe in any God, including the God of the Bible or the great architect of the universe. So the Masons who worship the sun God, in their lodges know that their God is not the God of the Bible, and someone else confirmed this. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky said this on page Roman numeral 29 in her book entitled Isis Unveiled. Demiurge. I'm sorry, I went too far there. If I got that right? Yeah, here we go. She wrote, the supernal, meaning heavenly, power built the universe. Freemasons derive from this word their phrase supreme architect. Notice that she did not say that this God created the universe. The God of the Bible made something from nothing. The Freemasons are claiming that their God built the universe. A God that built the universe had to take existing materials to build it. An architect, like the builder, builds from existing materials. The Masonic God did not create the universe from nothing. He took or will take existing materials to build the universe. The God of the Masons is not the creator God, the one who made a universe out of nothing. And I would now like to provide you with the final truth that the God worshipped in the Masonic temple is definitely not the creator God of the universe. Once again, this is Albert Pike, the #1 Mason of all time, and he wrote a book entitled Agenda in 1888, just 3 years before he died. Pike says in his book, quote, Pike says, forgive me, that this book contains a series of monographs intended to supplement the ritualistic instruction. So this book is intended to assist the Mason understand just what the symbols of the initiation ceremony mean. He says in his comments on the 26th degree inside the Masonic Lodge, there are other things that you shouldn't hear said now, and without which you will not be fully in possession of this degree. This is what he said on page 109 of his comments about the 28th degree. Nothing is produced from nothing, because existence can no more cease to be than nothing can cease not to be. To say that the world came forth from nothing is to propose a monstrous absurdity. Let me repeat that. To say that the world came forth from nothing is to propose a monstrous absurdity. He went on, everything that is proceeds from that which was, and consequently nothing of that which is can ever not be. So Mr. Pike was saying that he did not believe that there was a creator God who created the universe from nothing. And those of us who believe that there was a beginning, that the God of the Bible created the universe out of nothing, believe in a monstrous absurdity. He repeated this thought on page 66 of his book entitled Agenda. But it will certainly be difficult to prove by any direct language of the Scriptures that God created the universe and all souls of men as well as worlds of matter out of nothing. So apparently Mr. Pike did not read the Bible, because there is direct language in the Scriptures to prove him wrong. As I read Genesis 1:1, the very first words the Bible read, in the beginning God created the heaven and earth. There had to be nothing before God created it, or he wouldn't have had to create it. That is something I prove in my booklet entitled God Exists. The universe had to be created from nothing, so Pike is wrong. I want you to remember that Albert Pike is perhaps the greatest Mason of all time. The Masons have built statues to him, and their books praise him. His book entitled Morals and Dogma was given to every Mason at the 14th degree for about 100 years. So when Albert Pike speaks, the Masons listen. Yet Albert Pike said that to believe in a creator God is a monstrous absurdity. Let there be no doubt about it. The great architect of the universe, their God, inside the Masonic Lodge, worldwide, is Lucifer. And I will repeat that for those who do not think so. The great architect of the universe worshipped in the Masonic lodges worldwide is Lucifer. And let me say this to the Masons. If I am wrong, sue me. Let me prove that I am right in a court of law. You and I both know that there will be no lawsuit because I am reading this directly from your own material, from the greatest Mason of all time, Albert Pike. Mason, if you are watching this video today, figure it out and get out.